Hola, buenas tardes. Vamos a comenzar en un ratito. Para todos los que están ahorita, vamos a grabar esta grabación de esta presentación para tenerla para el futuro. Entonces, comenzamos en un ratito. Gracias.
Welcome everyone to our Community Air Protection, or AB 617, Year 3 Community Recommendations. My name is Mark Lautzenheiser. I'm one of the division managers here at the Sacramento Air District, and a little bit later I'll be Janice Lamb-Snyder, program manager with the district, will also be talking about some of our pieces of the presentation today.
Otra vez, buenas tardes. Las bienvenidas a todos para la presentación del programa del aire comunitario AB 617, año 3. El que está hablando, el manejador Mark Lautzenheiser, y también lo va a acompañar Janice Lamb-Snyder para también más información sobre esta presentación.
Next slide, please. So for those interested in a Spanish interpretation through Zoom, you've heard Jaime Limas, one of our other division managers here at the district, will be providing Spanish translation. This is a slide that simply tells you how to get to that from an English standpoint. David, go ahead and go to the next slide, please, and we'll have the same instructions in Spanish. So Jaime, if you want to go ahead and read through this real quick, and then we'll go with the two different audio channels. David, go back one, please. Thank you. So hopefully everyone will bear with us, and hopefully this will work well, so we can provide Spanish in a separate audio channel. When we do have the broad questions and discussion at the end, we will go back to just one channel so that everyone can hear all the questions that are asked following the presentation. David, once you've heard that Jaime has finished going through this slide, if you could please go to the next one. So again, welcome everyone. Just as a quick thing for those that may not be as familiar with Zoom, if you do have a question in the midst, go ahead and raise your hand. We don't really have a lot of slides. We hope to really have a lot of time following the presentation to go over questions. So if it's urgent, go ahead and put your hand up, but otherwise we'll try and wait till the end to address any and all questions that may be. I'm going to start us out with just a little bit of a broad overview about air quality and your health, why we're here today, and why good air quality can be an important decision in your community. It is important for everyone. It's important for your healthy lungs. Improved air quality can reduce other health problems. And we certainly know that some communities are more vulnerable than others. And these are typically communities oftentimes of color. These are communities that are economically burdened, communities that have many other issues that they have to deal with beyond just air pollution. So it's important to understand that how we can help these different communities. Next slide, please. So what is AB 617, or the Community Air Protection Program? And for your perspective, how can it help your community? So AB 617, or the Community Air Protection Program, brings a focus to local air quality in our underserved communities, with a goal of enhancing air pollution monitoring at a very local level, not just the regional monitors that we have going on, with an intention of bringing, hopefully, state funding to invest money to reduce air pollution in these communities. Next slide, please. So how does the Community Air Protection Program run? So you may also be familiar with the California Air Resources Board. They are the state agency. They are tasked with looking at nominations each year, selecting, they don't necessarily select communities every year, but they are tasked with selecting communities statewide for participation in the AB 617 program. And they are also the funnel for the funding. So the funding actually comes from the state legislature. And then from there, the money is distributed through the California Air Resources Board to the local air districts for running the program. The local agencies, in our case, the Sacramento Air Quality Management District, we recommend communities for inclusion to the state program. And then if selected, we are executing the programs in combination with the communities selected. Next slide, please. Just as an example, in the first year of the program, there were only 10 communities selected statewide. We did have one of those communities was here in Sacramento. It's in the South Sacramento area, specifically in the Florin community. So one of the first steps was having a steering committee, listening to local community air quality concerns. This committee is primarily residents and other voices from within those boundaries, learning from them how to outreach to their community, to their neighborhoods, collecting local air quality data, and being able to use that air monitoring data to improve our understanding of the specific air quality issues in their area in case they're different than what we think on across the entire county. Next slide, please. This is just a quick example of some of the efforts that have been able to happen in that Florin community. The map on the left shows the number of low-cost air quality monitors, which you can sort of see pictured in the middle picture, throughout their community to give them access to real-time data. The picture on the right is the ultimate goal, is as we collect this data, we are going to be doing a monitoring system that is more in-depth to dive into even more of the pollution issues once we know where the biggest and the biggest challenges are within their community. This is simply being used as an example of, as other communities are selected, what some of those opportunities might look like. Next slide, please. So how are communities selected? So each year, the California Resources Board does open the nomination process, and there is the potential for them to select additional communities based on the resources being provided by the legislature. So how can different communities be nominated? The one way is local air district nominations, and we're going to be talking about that today. But the public can also self-nominate communities. This can be duplicative. It can be matching what the district is already doing, just showing that there is community support, or it can be on its own. The state has also made the self-nomination process very simple, and we'll talk a bit more about that later on in the presentation, but basically a community can simply email and contact the State Air Resources Board of their interest in self-nominations. So the self-nomination process is ongoing throughout the year, but the state does consider new communities just once each year. The closing date for this current round will be in mid-October, and that is when the Sacramento Air District will be doing our nominations as well, with a recommendation to the State Air Resources Board of the Year 3 communities in December. Next slide, please. So again, a little bit more on how you can self-nominate. As I said, there's not an official deadline, but since the state does consider it just once each year, if they're going to be able to add additional communities, the best time is right now, prior to or by October 16th. We do have the email address where communities can self-nominate is at the bottom of this slide. That's communityair@arb.ca.gov. They also do accept nominations by mail. And although they do take them at their board meetings as well, their next board meeting will be after October 16th. So I would suggest by email or mail. For the next few slides, I'm going to be turning it over to Janice Lamb-Snyder, and she's going to be talking a little bit about our assessment and the general areas that the Sacramento Air District is recommending. And then really where we're going to be looking at for feedback from everyone on this call, not just tonight, but over the next few weeks, is what do you think the community boundaries should look like for a new community? I'm going to just say this at the beginning. We actually think there are many, many areas in Sacramento in need of additional air monitoring. And so although you're going to hear Janice talk about 3 areas in particular, it's not that we think these are the only 3 areas. It's just we do know that the state will be only selecting a very small number of new communities this next year. And the 3 areas that Janice is going to focus on are those areas that we think we can make the strongest argument at this time. But again, we think that there are many areas in Sacramento that certainly are in need of the enhanced monitoring and focus. And with that, next slide, and I'll turn it over to Janice Lamb-Snyder. Janice, you're on mute.
Hi, good evening, everyone. So like Mark said, I'm going to talk a little bit about what are the information that the district is using to recommend year 3 communities. And basically, there's several types of information that we use. We look at exposure to air pollution and its associated health impacts. We look at air pollution modeling. And in addition to that, we consider population information, such as whether an area is of low income, whether or not it has higher asthma rates or hospitalizations. We also look at sensitive receptors. And what does sensitive receptors mean? It's the number of parks, schools, hospital, daycares in each of these areas. And this year includes, our year 3 nomination includes the most up-to-date air pollution information that we have. And in addition to that, we have updated the analysis to provide more weight on the population information to ensure that we're looking at our most needed communities and the area's exposure to air pollution. So next slide, David, please. So how did this information change from previous year's recommendation? First, it continues to highlight that we have communities that are burdened with air pollution in Sacramento. And as Mark mentioned earlier, we're going to be focusing on the top 3 communities this upcoming year due to the limited communities that CARB may be selecting for this year due to resources. What's different also with this updated analysis, some areas do not rank as high when population information were more emphasized, such as downtown Sacramento. Next slide, please. So proposed year 3 recommendations, like we mentioned, CARB will likely select a very limited number of new communities due to the state funding. So based on our updated information and ongoing feedback that we have been hearing since the launch of the program, we're recommending 3 general areas this year in Sacramento. The first one is going to be North Sacramento. Second is Oak Park, Fruit Ridge area, and the Meadowview area. Like Mark mentioned, the district will continue to advocate for more communities in future years. And like he mentioned, these 3 communities are not the only 3 communities we think that are in need. We think that there's lots of more communities in Sacramento, but these are the ones that we're putting forth this year. Next slide, please. With that, so this is a map to show you the 3 general areas that we were that I had just shared. What you see here is the North Sacramento area, and what you see in the round circle are simply just to give you an idea of the general area that we're hoping to get feedback from you all about. And they're not there to, you know, be a starting boundary, but we wanted to give you a sense of what we're the areas that we're talking about. Next slide, please. So with that, we are, how can you help us with your 3 recommendations? Tonight, we are hoping to get your feedback, and we have maps that you can submit to the district on your suggested boundaries. In addition, you know, if you are able to share what you think those areas might be referred to, names, if we got them wrong, let us know. And then what will happen then is that you're going to be sharing, we'll be taking the feedback and the ideas that you guys propose to us, and incorporating that into our submittal to the state. So, you know, share your ideas and thoughts on the proposed areas, and suggest ideas for the general community boundaries. Next slide, please. So tonight is not the only night that that you can provide feedback and on the boundaries. Really, this is to share some information, to start this dialogue. You can find more information on our website. You can go to our community air protection website for instructions. We do have a packet that has different information, instructions on how to submit, the different maps that you can draw on to share this information back with us. Next slide, please. So what's the deadline, and what do you submit to us? On the CAP web page that I just showed, there's going to be instructions on how to submit online or by mail. The deadline to submit this information is October 23rd, 2020. And what you'll see in the packet is several maps. One map is the top 5% of the areas in Sacramento County with the highest air pollution burden. The next map that you're also going to have is a top 10% map, and that's really to help provide some context if you wanted to expand boundaries to see what are the nearby areas maybe ranking. And then there are 3 additional maps that show, and that's an example of that is what you see on the right-hand side with street names. We know that most of us, you know, look at an area and we characterize it by its street names, and so we wanted to provide that for you all. Next slide, please.
Actually, Janice, if I may, just real quick, maybe go back 1 slide. So what we're really saying there on the top 10% map is we're not proposing any boundaries at the moment for these new communities. So when Janice says expand, we're simply saying we're giving you a top 10% map so that if you're looking to say where, as you're drawing the boundaries, you know, maybe the 5% has some gaps. And you're saying, what should I include? Just it's for your reference as you're looking at new communities.
Right. So where do you submit this information after you've drawn it in a map? There's 3 options. One, you can email it to us at the website link that we've provided on the slide. It's Community Air Protection Monitoring at airquality.org. If you could put the subject line boundary map on there, that'll indicate to us that that's the submittal for that. Next, if you would like to also submit it through the USPS mail, you can attention that to Mr. Mark Lautzenheiser at Sacramento Metropolitan Air Quality District at 777 12th Street, 3rd floor, Sacramento, 95814. And the third option is that you can always drop it off at the district address, which is also on the slide. Next slide, please. And with that, I'll hand that back to Mark Lautzenheiser.
Great, thank you, Janice. So again, we're about to open up for questions in just a moment. But again, I just want to reiterate that in addition to the district nomination process, there is the self-nomination. And we do think this can be very complementary to both the district nominations. And it also, I think, leads into the next thing that, which is the community air grants. This is not currently open yet, but this is another piece of AB 617, where the State Air Resources Board will open the process here later this year, early next year, for community air grants. And this is an opportunity for community groups or collective groups to put in if you have a proposal. For example, we already have a partnership in Sacramento that has received a community air grant, and they're currently they're working on their plan right now to do some monitoring in both North Sacramento and parts of Oak Park. So this is simply another opportunity that will be coming up later this year or early next year from the state. And again, this also can be complementary to the self-nomination process because even if a community is not selected this year by the state, it will go to show the interest and the level of support for possible community air grant opportunities. Next slide, please. So again, contact information for both Janice and I is on this slide. That way, if you do have any questions that we don't get to tonight or you think of afterwards, feel free to email either one of us. Next slide, please. And we're going to go to the public commenting period here in just one moment, but I also want to let people know, in case people are already sort of good, after this regular presentation and after we now go through any questions or comments that you want to share tonight, once we're done with that, we are going to take a brief moment just to share a survey from our mobile source incentive team, part of our transportation group, on so they can get your feedback as part of our incentive opportunities, but we'll talk more about that after the public comment period. So it seems like we have a fairly manageable group size at the moment. So if you have not participated before, if you're in the Zoom app itself, you can click the raise hand button and we'll go ahead and call on you to go ahead and ask any questions you may have. If you're on your phone, please dial *9, which will raise a virtual hand button for us as well. And then when you are called, please state your name and, if you so choose, your affiliation. And with that, we will open it up for public comments. Or comments, questions.
Where is the raise hand on?
Great question. So for those looking for the raised hand button, if you click on the participants at the bottom middle, it's a little bit more on the left middle, you'll see participants. It'll pull up a list of names, and then on the bottom left of that, you'll see a little blue hand that you can click, which is the raise hand button. Okay, I apologize, it was not, the hands went up very quickly. I didn't necessarily catch all the order of them going up, so I'm simply going to go down alphabetically to begin with. Adrian Wren with Valley Vision.
Thanks, Mark. Hopefully you can hear me. Is that the case?
We can.
Oh, okay, great. I've been having issues with my cheap little headset thingy. So Adrian Wren, Valley Vision. Thanks for allowing me to speak. Just wanted to reiterate something that Mark alluded to regarding the community air grants. So Valley Vision has partnered with Breathe California, Sacramento Region, Walk Sacramento, and Green Tech Education to facilitate community air monitoring in North Sacramento and in Oak Park, as Mark mentioned, via community air grant. So we're excited that you guys are putting forward these these recommendations, and we absolutely see our work as totally complementary to the the potential formal AB 617 designation that could come about via these nominations. So again, happy that there are recommendations moving forward. I guess one question I did have, and I don't know if this is the right time for questions, but I just wanted to put it out there, was that I think I saw that there was a self-nomination for the entirety of Sacramento County that's on the CARB website. You can look at the list of all the nominees there. And so I'm wondering if those sort of like, large scale self-nominations can stand up to some of these more neighborhood level nominations, sort of what the difference is, what the feasibility of those large scale self-nominations are. So in any case, that's my comment. Thanks.
Okay. Well, I'll take a very brief crack at it, and then we'll go to the next questions as well. I think it's tough to say. I think part of the intention, though, of 617 is that you are trying to get more focused into the community level. Given the limited resources that the state legislature is providing and able to provide across the state right now, especially in light of some of the budgeting situations go on, it would probably be it would be diluted down a bit, but that's not to say that it potentially couldn't work either. So I think it just depends upon what different groups are looking for. Next question, I see we have Jeff Solomon, and by the way, I apologize if I get any names.
Mark?
Yes,
Can
Janice.
we pause for a second? Is Jaime back on? I want to make sure that we have the Spanish interpretation.
Oh, yes.
Jaime, are you back on?
It looks like, sorry, this is a little internal thing we're taking care of here. It looks like Jaime is just taking care of it in the Spanish channel. So we'll let him go through that question, and then we'll re-merge the channels. So if we do get any questions in Spanish, both channels can hear what's being shared on questions. So we'll pause just, sorry, Jeff, we'll pause just one moment to allow Jaime to finish the translation of the question response, and then we'll continue with questions. We appreciate everyone's patience as we work through a lot more of these Zoom type meetings and trying to provide information, hopefully to a broader group of our residents here in Sacramento. Okay, Jeff, you have your hand up with a question?
Yes, I'm Jeff Solomon. I'm a resident of neighborhood of Meadowview, and I'm very pleased that Meadowview was chosen as one of the 3 areas. The best way for me to ask this question is to explain what I think is some correct information, which will expose to you what I don't understand. So I'm a member, I live in Meadowview, and I want to make sure that the boundaries are, that what you're considering Meadowview are appropriate. So I'm going to go to a website, which I'm not clear on what the website is. If you could put that type it in the chat area, that would be great. And I'm going to look at what you guys think Meadowview is. Now, normally people think the north boundary of Meadowview is Florin Road. I don't know how familiar you are with you're probably very familiar with the landmarks here. But I would like somehow to get the executive airport into the area also because of the huge amount of pollution that it has. Now, I don't know if that's not considered Meadowview technically, but I would like to make it part of Meadowview just for this area. Is there any danger of me just slapping it in and then disqualifying Meadowview because it's too big an area? So if you could respond to that piece of information, I would appreciate it.
Certainly. Let me give Jaime just 1 second to translate. Maybe Jaime, maybe if you could sort of, as much as you need to translate that,
Yes.
and then I will give I think I can definitely answer your question, Jeff.
Sure. And just real quick, just to respond to Adrian. Adrian, I was already transferred over to the English, I think, as you were there in the Spanish. Para traducir la pregunta del señor Jeff Solomon, él vive en la comunidad de Meadowview y su pregunta es, pues, muchos no conocen las fronteras de Meadowview, entonces lo que él quisiera hacer es incluir el aeropuerto municipal de Sacramento. Entonces, ¿qué sería el riesgo de tener el aeropuerto municipal de Sacramento incluido también?
Thank you, Jaime. So Jeff, and for all those on the call, the short answer is there is no problem with you drawing and suggesting boundaries further north or south. We don't have any boundaries in mind at the moment. We were simply knowing that the map, all those are based on just census tracts. That's where the data level is available. We are not proposing that as starting boundaries. We're simply showing you that as sort of a starting point. If you want to draw a rectangle, a square, a circle, we're looking for the community's feedback on what is the areas of concern, hopefully surrounding those areas. But if you even just said, well, it's just the area north of it, we would consider that. It's just those colored areas will help us with make a stronger argument to the state.
Okay, thank you. And if you could sometime put down the correct internet website to put that information in the chat, because I kind of missed it as it went by.
No problem. We'll get that in there. Also, we are going to have all the slides for tonight will be on our webpage.
Oh, okay.
As will be a recording of this presentation. So that way, if there's anyone else who could not make tonight and would like to be able to watch it or share this, there is time over the next 3 weeks to still go ahead and others to look at it and share input.
Thank you. I'm going to go on mute now.
I'm going to pause before I call the next person. I'm going to let Jaime translate that answer, and I'm going to see if I can also pull up the page, though, for everyone and put it in the chat.
Thank you. La respuesta fue que no hay problema. La persona individual puede sugerir cualquier fronteras. Solamente lo que hemos presentado aquí son solamente las áreas generalmente. Entonces ustedes pueden venir, pueden llegar y pueden dibujar las fronteras que ustedes piensan serían apropiadas para esa comunidad o esa área. Lo que es importante aquí es que nosotros queremos oír las voces de ustedes sobre todo lo que es la comunidad de donde ustedes viven. Y es donde nosotros lo que no sabemos, porque como no vivimos en esas comunidades, es lo importante que se tiene que reflexionar. Entonces, también todo lo que esta presentación se está grabada y las preguntas se van a poner en la página en la red también para que la gente pueda agarrar la información. En este momento también quiero tomar un momento para pedirles a todos, hay gente que solamente hablan en español que están en esta junta ahorita. Mark, what I asked is if there are any Spanish-only speaking people, community members here now, because if there is not, then there won't be a need for translating.
Fair enough. So maybe before we go to the next question, we'll just give anyone a moment.
So otra vez estoy preguntando que si hay gente que solamente habla en español para continuar la traducción, si no paramos la traducción en español y seguimos en inglés solamente. And it doesn't appear that there are Spanish-only speaking people, Mark.
Okay. Certainly, we'll just try and keep an eye. If we see any change in the participant list, we'll double check just to make sure that we're not excluding anyone. Next up, we have Herman with United Latinos.
Hi, good evening. Thank you. So my question is, out of the 3 areas you're suggesting, CARB will approve one of the 3? Is that what's going to happen?
So we do not know if CARB will approve any of them. We just think these are the 3 strongest areas in Sacramento for us to be proposing. And then they'll be looking at it as part of the statewide selection. But what we have heard is that statewide, they will probably only be looking at a very small handful because of the resources coming from the state legislature.
Okay. And my question then is, say the state does not select any of the 3, AQMD is still the regulating agency for the area. So what kind of things can we do if there is no selection by the state in those hot zones?
So that's a great question. What we'll be continuing to do, though, is So for example, you know, there is certainly the community air grant opportunity coming up where we're looking to try and get resources, and we have supported 2 different nominations last year, and hopefully there will be additional groups interested in getting community air grants from the state this year. There are different state and federal grant opportunities that the district is always looking for to bring more resources to doing more monitoring throughout Sacramento. So in a broad general sense, we will be continuing to shoot for all of the opportunities that we can to be bringing additional resources here to Sacramento and to the areas that are most impacted by pollution.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. Sharon Sprouse.
Sorry, I had to get unmuted. So 2 questions. So what does this mean for the south area that had been one of the communities before? That's question number 1, and then I have a follow-up.
Okay, so the existing Florin community in South Sacramento is still one of the communities statewide, and so we are continuing with our efforts in that community. We recently completed what was called the Community Air Monitoring Plan for that area. And so the map you saw a moment ago showed the phase 1 monitoring that is going on there. And we are currently in the midst, while that remains, we're currently doing phase 2 monitoring, which is diving down a little bit more into pollutants that that community was concerned about. And those efforts will be continuing over this next year. So right now there are 13 communities statewide that are in the 617 program, and those communities remain as part of the statewide communities.
Oh, and I should say I'm with the Franklin Neighborhood Development Corporation. So we had always hoped that the boundary would actually go further north, because right now it's 47th Avenue, which is part of our district, but doesn't include all of our district. I think the thing that we would point out as well is now you're looking at Oak Park Fruit Ridge, but with 99 in the middle, and people going back and forth, especially school kids cross the freeway a lot, and there are quite a number of schools, elementary schools particularly, where kids go back and forth across the freeway. Though to us, it would make sense to potentially include both sides of the freeway a bit further north, and then possibly, you know, up to Oak Park as well. So, because we increasingly are looking at how do we reconnect these communities as opposed to, you know, allowing 99 to be the barrier that we all think about. Well, that just divides them.
Right. So hopefully what I'm about to say will answer your question. So as you are proposing or suggesting boundaries to us for that broad Oak Park area, you are not limited on one side of the freeway or the other. If you feel that, say, east and west, and I'm just going to pick an arbitrary number here, by half a mile is appropriate, or it's a half mile west and a mile and a half east, you can suggest that as part of a new community boundaries that we would be suggesting to the state. So the map itself on those colors was simply showing by census tracts those areas that highlighted the most impacted, but they are certainly not intended to be starting boundaries. So if you're looking, saying, hey, there's an impact east and west, you can certainly draw a proposed boundary for that new area, including east and west.
And just one final question. So in terms of air pollution, since you have monitors south of 47th Avenue, then what are you basing the air pollution measures on north of that area? So like question. For Oak Park Fruit Ridge and North Sac and Meadowview. Certainly.
So I'm going to go a little bit high level to begin with, and then if you or others are interested, I can go into a deeper dive as well. Some of the information is based upon our regional air monitors, and that was true even for the Florin community before it was selected as well. So the district does have a number of monitoring stations throughout Sacramento that measure for a variety of pollutants. Some of that information also is based upon toxics modeling. So roadway emissions that's been done by the state, and that state information also included what we call emissions inventory of all of our permitted sources was factored into that as well. So where some of these areas have rated up is a combination of both pollution considerations, but it's also based upon a lot of the demographics or the economics, the other disparities that have affected some of these communities. So when we've looked at it, as you look at some of the different tools, and I don't remember which, let me go back real quick, just on a separate screen here for myself. I know we went through it fairly quickly, but if you, at your community, if you want to look back at slide 11, actually, maybe David, could you go back to slide 11 real quick? So this is just at a very high level, a lot of the different factors that went into consideration or that go into what causes areas to highlight. And again, it's not that other areas didn't highlight as well. We were simply showing what were the top 5% that rose up, because these are the areas we think we can help make the strongest argument to the state on being selected. But as I said, there are many areas in Sacramento for consideration. That's why tonight's meeting is not us coming in with any boundaries for these new areas. Much like the earlier question, hey, can I go up north and include this area? If your concern is covering east and west because of people, the students and the kids crossing over the freeways, please, by all means, do include that in there. But this information on this slide gives a little bit of an indication. We also, on our webpage, have a little bit more detailed breakdown of those different considerations as well. Did that help take care of your question there, or at least, and again, we can always dive more into it as well. And as I said, we do have more detailed information about the analysis on our webpage.
Oh, that's great. Thank you.
Okay. Jesse Reese.
Yes, thank you. My name is Jesse Reese, President of Meadowview Neighborhood Association. Actually, I think a couple of questions I was going to ask seem like they've been answered. And one of them was if we were selected, would Meadowview be guaranteed a stop? And I think you answered that. And also, I'm curious about this AIR program. When it comes down to it, will it be including canopies? Because I think that is an important factor with clean air. And I know we had meetings before and talked about how Meadowview does not have proper canopy as opposed to East Sacramento, William Land Park, and other areas. So that would be kind of a focus point in all of this analogy.
So it's a great question, Jesse, there. I'm going to sort of give a sort of answer. And the reason I say it that way is what we would be proposing at the moment is community air monitoring plans, much like what happened with Florida community. So it's actually finding out what are the concerns, what does the community want us to monitor for, what are the things they're worried about. Then the potential next step in that process is what's called a community emission reduction plan. And that's then where, with a lot of work from the community, then we work out a plan on how to reduce the pollution in the area. Now, tree canopy could very well be a piece of that, the community emission reduction plan. Obviously, trees themselves, we think are very important. We absolutely agree. How much of that we can factor into the plan is just something we have to work through and see what funding or resources maybe the state has, and will they allow us to do that? And or are there other partners that we want to work with to encourage that type of change to happen? Because sometimes some of the decisions, and I'm talking very broadly now of the experience of some of the other communities statewide, a lot of times some of the requests have not always directly are based on what the air district can do. Sometimes it's zoning issues. Sometimes it's tree canopy. Sometimes it's where's the truck traffic being routed on roads? These are some of the questions that have come up statewide. And not all of these decisions are under our control, but we can still consider them as part of the plan and make sure that various other government agencies and other partners are aware of this to see if we can't get their buy-off to make those changes.
Okay, I know it's out of your hands, so to speak, but just like in the past when we had this carbon program, all of a sudden Meadowview was red line out of the carbon program. I guess they said we didn't get a lot of pollution in these areas. So those were just some of my concerns.
Certainly.
Thank you.
No
Mr.
problem at all.
Reese, I'll
Okay.
just
Yes.
add something. You know, and that's being explored right now in the South Sacramento Flooring community as we're moving towards the next step. And so, you know, the Sacramento Tree Foundation has also shown up to a lot of our meetings, and the city and county are getting very engaged with us as well, because, you know, I think this program is very important for all of our communities, and a lot of people are noticing, right? And so, so there are, I think, more opportunities for us in the future to have this collaborative relationship and to find some solutions such as canopy. So.
Okay, thanks.
Great, thank you, Janice, for expanding on that, because that definitely has been one of the areas of interest to our flooring community. Liz Johnson.
Hi, I'm Liz Johnson. I'm on the board of the Gardenland and Northgate Neighborhood Association. First, I have a clarification I want to ask about on the map for North Sacramento, because last year Janice and Ashley came and presented at one of our meetings, and apparently we were on one of the communities recommended last year, but it was kind of hard to see the map on the slide, but it looks like we're not included or, you know, connected to North Sacramento this time. Is that true?
So all we're showing, so not knowing the specific area where you're at on that map.
You just passed the map.
It's slide 14, David.
So that curve on the west is actually it's a levee. It's the railroad tracks. And so that's the eastern boundary of Gardenland. So we're to the west of that, Gardenland and the Northgate Boulevard, and then just to the west of Northgate is our community.
Okay.
So they're adjacent, and we're back to the question of the borders. You know, can we change the borders? Which you've already made clear that we can do that, correct?
Correct. So we are not proposing borders at all with these maps.
Oh, okay.
So this is simply, these maps and the coloring is purely based on census tracts.
Okay.
So these are not intended as boundaries. Even the ovals or the circles around them are simply to generally show the area. So when we say North Sacramento, we're referring to this general area. The same for the Oak Park, Fruit Ridge, and the same for the Meadowview.
Okay.
One of the maps that you'll have from our webpage, just to help give you more information as you're drawing suggested boundaries, this is the top 5%. We also show a top 10%. So it shows the areas adjacent to these that may start highlighting. So for example, in the North Sacramento area, you may see the areas slightly east and west also on the 10% map. So that just help you provide you information as the community members are suggesting boundaries to us. The same is true for like the Oak Park Fruit Ridge area. Obviously, there's a definite gap in between the two colored areas. But when anyone who clicks on the 10% map, you'll see some of that starts filling in as well. So these are not our proposals. So what you saw a year ago, we sort of came in with some suggested boundaries already. We're doing it differently this year. We're coming in, we're showing you the areas that have highlighted up the top that we would suggest you may want to include as like an anchor for the area, because it will help support these communities being picked. But we're not coming in with any intended boundaries up front. We want to hear from everyone on this call and anyone else who would like to provide us feedback over the next 3 weeks on what you think covers your community, much like the gentleman from Meadowview who was asking about the airport to the north.
Correct. Okay. So then my next question is, so last year we were requested to write a letter of support from our neighborhood association, which we did. And that brings me to the topic of community engagement. So how heavily weighted is community engagement? Because we already know in Gardenland Northgate, there's probably at least 2 or 3 or 4 separate organizations that we can probably get on board to write letters of support. I don't know about the other side of the levee with North Sacramento. We're happy to go over there and organize, but I just want to understand how that's going to work for us strategically. For example, if we just do it for Gardenland Northgate and nobody from North Sac writes a letter, how's that going to all shake out?
So it's a good question. I will take my best shot at that one. From our perspective, we think all 3 of these areas are in need. So, but ultimately that question comes down to the State Air Resources Board as they're considering it. I can't speak for them. And I know, even though we do have some members from CARB on the call, and I will allow them to speak up if they would like, my gut reaction is that they're probably looking at is just the package in its overall completeness, meaning, both, the pictures like here and how this is showing on the impact for communities. Certainly any and all letters of support show community interest and engagement. That was one of the things that I think was helpful, even for the grant I mentioned earlier that Valley Vision and many other diverse partners were able to get, where they're doing some monitoring in North Sacramento and in the Oak Park area, was showing that there was that support and that these communities had been previously nominated as well. That said, I don't know if anyone from CARB wants a specific answer, but I don't think it's probably, but my guess is that it's probably not quite as defined as saying, oh, this neighborhood did submit one, but this one didn't, therefore that weakens it. I think just anything that goes in helps strengthen it.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Thank you.
This is Karen Buckley with CARB, and yes, it's the entire package that we look at. And remember, it is statewide that we look at all of these applications. So I'd say whatever you have that you want to put forward, just create your package and send it in.
Thank you, Karen. Okay, I think we went through the set of initial questions. I do see Adrian Wren.
Thanks. Sorry for the second question. Part of an issue that AB 617 communities have been having is the funding conundrum, right? So limited funding that everybody's all the air districts are kind of fighting over to, invest in these selected communities. Is there, it's a two-parter. Number one, does the SMACMA, does the Sacramento Air District anticipate getting additional funding if one of these 3 communities is selected? And 2, is that funding proportional to the funding you already get through South Sac? And then the third part, sort of the point of the question is, will South Sac Florin, the already selected community, receive less funding or less attention from the Air District if you guys, or if there is another community selected within your jurisdiction?
What's the expression there? The $10 million question. So in proposing a new community, though, we would be looking to get additional resources from the state. We don't know what that would look like. We don't even know yet the breakout for this upcoming year for the existing community. So the actual number is always in flux. Certainly any additional communities added statewide mean that the same, so for those that may not be tracking this as closely as some of us, I know Adrian and Armand have attended many of our Florin community meetings, so some of this may be repeat for them, but for everyone else's benefit, the pot of money from the state legislature has stayed the same so far through the first 3 years. And maybe I should say I'm thankful it's at least stayed the same given what's gone on this year with the state budget. But we started with 10 communities statewide. We're now at 13. The pot of money stayed the same. So in part to answer your question, Adrian, any new communities that the state adds will start lessening. It does mean you're splitting the pie more ways. So that will come up regardless if we're successful in getting an additional community here in Sacramento versus an additional community somewhere else in the state. We would be looking though for more resources than we have currently for just our Florin community. So we would have resources for the existing community and the efforts that are already committed to as part of the camp, the community air monitoring plan for them, and resources for us to start doing similar efforts based on the community feedback in any future communities. What that level would be though is an ongoing work in process. And hopefully, and obviously right now, especially with the pandemic situation and the impacts on the overall statewide budget, you know, it's anybody's guess. Certainly for the first 2 years of the program before the more recent situations, one of the things that not just our own air district, but air districts throughout California and communities throughout California have been advocating for is for the legislature to provide more resources so that we can be adding in more of these communities that are absolutely in need of enhanced monitoring and reductions in their communities as well. And you said you had a two-part question, Adrian, or did that cover all your questions?
You covered all three of them. Thank you.
Okay, not seeing any other questions at the moment. We'll still give everyone a moment in case there are additional questions just as you're thinking and mulling it over. I think the one thing though we've heard tonight that maybe we'll just add a clear note to our webpage so that if there are people outside of this meeting who are then looking to provide feedback, is making it clear that these are not boundaries that we're proposing to begin with. These are simply the areas that we're suggesting you anchor your community suggestions to us for the boundaries. I would say that's probably one of the top messages that I've at least heard tonight in terms of some guidance that we can help put out there.
Hey, Mark, I did get a question in the chat.
Okay.
It says, why are we asking for feedback on community boundaries through 1023? CARB is accepting recommendations through 1016.
Fair enough. So that's a great question. So yes, CARB has asked the districts to submit information by the 16th of October. And we've already had discussions with CARB, CARB is the California Air Resources Board, that we will be submitting these 3 general areas to CARB by the 16th with a follow-up within the next couple of weeks of suggested boundaries. And our understanding is that that will be acceptable, because what they need to do is they simply need time to start preparing their submittal to their own board in December, which is why they've asked by the 16th. And so we will be suggesting, barring different feedback that we start hearing either tonight or over the next couple of weeks, we're going to be suggesting that we do think these 3 general areas are the priorities. And I should mention this. The state all along on their program has said they will continue to consider all communities that have been nominated through all 3 years of the program. The 3 areas that we have highlighted, we have already nominated them every year of the program. So these are not new areas that we have just all of a sudden said today, hey, these are new 3 areas. We proposed all 3 of the areas you're seeing tonight have been, in year 1, we proposed 10 different areas to the state, one of which was selected. So these 3 areas already remain part of consideration by the state by default. At least that was my take of their presentation a few weeks ago on nominations. We're simply saying that we're updating our recommendations in that one of the things we've learned in our Florin community process is that we want more community feedback on boundaries than what we've done previously. So we will still have these 3 broad areas are going to be to CARB by the 16th, but they are open to us providing then some more specifics on the suggested boundaries based upon that community feedback, which is why we want to give our communities a little bit extra time to provide us feedback, and so the communities themselves don't feel rushed.
Mark, Mark, if we have a little bit of time, I think maybe it might be helpful for the community to, maybe we could walk them through the website to see where they should click and where the instructions are. I think, I mean, it seems like we don't have any questions lined up, and I think I'd like to take some time to do that so that it's easy.
Okay, Janice, in that case, so why don't I go and finish giving them the link as well for the incentive survey?
Yes.
Just real quick. So if there are no other questions, I think Janice has made a great suggestion. So we'll take a moment. I'll just finish this last slide, and then we'll go ahead and take a couple minutes. We'll switch off the slides, and we'll actually walk you through, as if you were viewing our website, where you would go for this information. So real quickly, separate from the nomination and separate from community selection, we also do have community air protection incentives through the California Air Resources Board, through the state legislature funding. And the group that does work on that is looking for input from the community. As this slide says, it sounds like I'm just reading it, and that's not my intention. But basically, your input will help them on how to put out the applications and to rank the projects once they do start coming in for these particular incentives. It's a related but separate program. And so they have provided, they've created a link here. And actually, this link is actually a little bit of, we're giving members of the public who are on the call tonight sort of an early access to this. The survey will actually be officially launched by next Monday, October 5th, although you can start to take it as of tonight. We currently have the survey is translated into Spanish, traditional Chinese, and simplified Chinese, and there is intention of having 2 more language translations that will be available by Monday, both Russian and Hmong. And for those that do choose to participate in the survey, there will also be a raffle that will be completed after the survey closes. So this is just, the incentives are not tied specifically to the existing community or are not tied to a community being selected now. Our availability to do these funds is tied more on the economics of all of our different communities that we have previously nominated. But this is just another opportunity where we are looking for everyone's feedback. And since we do have members of the community on this call, we wanted to go ahead and release it early for your access.
And Mark, we can share this publicly then from here on out, or should we wait until all translations are available?
I would probably ask that you maybe hold off on sharing it more publicly. And Adrian Wren with Valley Vision, I appreciate that you guys have you have a great distribution list. I would probably suggest waiting till Monday, just because I'd hate for someone to go there and try and click one of the translations that's not ready yet. But since everyone on this meeting has heard that 2 of them are still waiting, your expectation will be matching with what the website and the survey can provide today. But definitely as of Monday, please feel free to share this survey link with others. In fact, we would thank you for that opportunity, not just Valley Vision, but anyone else that's on this call that would like to help share with your neighborhood associations, your community organizations. By all means, please do. Okay, with that said then, David, if you don't mind, since you are currently sharing your screen anyway, maybe you could take us through, just sort of take us to our webpage for the moment. So for those that have not been to our webpage before, it is airquality.org, O-R-G, air quality written as one word, will take you to our main webpage. I'll give David just a moment to pull that up. So once you do go ahead and get to our webpage, if you scroll down just a little bit, you will see a number of squares or buttons, if you will. David, if you could scroll down just a little bit. or we'll wait for the page to pop back up again.
Sorry, let me share my screen again.
For those that are on there, as many Zoom meetings as we're all in, it is always still a learning experience for all of us. So this is just the airquality.org. This is what you would see when you first come to our webpage. Scrolling down, the very top left button, back up a little bit, David. You will see Community Air Protection. If you click that link, that takes you to our broad AB 617 page. Just scrolling down a little bit, you will again see the information for tonight's meeting. The only difference is this will be replaced hopefully tomorrow with a video link to tonight's meeting, so that if there are other members in your neighborhoods, your communities, your organizations that you would like them to be able to watch this, they'll be able to click the link and view the meeting from tonight. Scrolling down just a little bit further. Actually, I'm sorry, go back up. I thought I was on this page already as well. Oh, there it is. So you will see a copy of the presentation. So the PowerPoint, for anyone that was wondering, hey, can I get that address again, or those links? The presentation is right there. The very next line, Year 3 Community Instructions and Maps, is a set of instructions, and both a 5% map, a 10% map, and then one map for each of the 3 areas that we've been talking about tonight. So there's one map specific for North Sacramento, one for the Oak Park Fruit Ridge, and one for the broad Meadowview area. David, why don't you go ahead and click that one real quick? So we do talk about, again, what the attachments are. Go ahead and scroll down. This is the 5% map. It's the same one you just saw during the presentation. Scrolling down, you'll see the 10% map starts adding in the other areas that start highlighting when you go to a top 10%. And then the next 3 are just a more close-up with street level views of the maps. Because as, I don't remember the gentleman's name earlier, I apologize. But as he was saying, you know, some people consider Meadowview to go up to Florin. But what about the airport? This way you can actually see where like the airport would fall. In this case, the map does not currently only covers about half of the airport. So if you would like the airport included in here, go up fully, and you can even write on the map, I am suggesting all of the airport be included. So even though the map itself right now does not do that, in fact, it may not be ready for the next couple of days just because I don't necessarily have everyone back in tomorrow, but maybe we'll even see about doing this map. And well, let me ask this real quick. This is about, I'm looking for some feedback from especially those people that live down in the Meadowview area. The good or bad if we start zooming out is we start losing some of the street level detail. Are you as concerned if we slid this map so it showed more of the north, even though it might be moving it away from some of the parts to the south? Or do you think it's okay leaving it like this and you can just handwrite on there that you would like all of the airport included? What do you think is best?
This is Jeff, the person who originally asked the question. I think it's best for me to actually go in there and get my fingers dirty and then get back to you. I just can't make a comment right now.
Fair enough. I just don't want to be deciding for you guys what the best way is to show a map for you to draw on.
Yeah.
And this is Jesse Reese. I think Jeff and I will probably, talk about that a little bit later, come up with some conclusion.
Okay. And if you guys do have feedback on that, like saying, hey, could you slide the map north or south, let us know and we can look at putting something else out there up.
And these are supposed to be from individuals rather than groups, or how? I'm a little confused about that.
It can be either way. So certainly if it's from an entire group, I don't want to say we'll weight it more heavily per se, but I guess I would probably give, if I see something's from a group and saying like, the entire 3 neighborhoods have all agreed on this, then that's going to have a pretty big weight versus if I just get a single map from someone that says over here. Obviously, depending on how many submittals we'll get, we're going to be doing our best to propose something that reflects the broad feedback. So it won't be discounted. It won't be penalized for being from a group. Just please let us know that it's representing multiple people's perspectives. So for example, if we get one common map from people in the Meadowview area, that's fantastic. If we get 20 individual ones from Meadowview, we'll work through that as well. So but just let us know how it's coming in and the group's views that it's groups or individual views that it's representing.
We want to make this, and we want to make this as easy as possible for the communities. So we know that, you know, dropping it off at the district, you got to get downtown. We're also accepting photos. So, you know, if you want to take a picture with your photo and attach it to, you know, an email and send it to us, that's totally acceptable. And so, and if that's the most easiest way for you to get that information to us. So I wanted to make sure to let you all know that however easiest is to get that information to us, we're happy to accept it.
Can I ask an airport question sort of while we're on the topic?
Sure.
So, you know, it's been coming up for a while now. Are there examples of other, and this is maybe for the Meadowview folks to look into, but are there examples of, you know, there's ABC 17 communities all across the state. Are there examples of other designated communities that have included airports in their areas and have been able to sort of strategize around emission reductions for those facilities, for those airports?
So I will take just a short stab at that one, Adrian. I don't know that there are specifically been airports pulled into communities. Probably the closest to my knowledge is the West Oakland, but obviously their focus and interest was the port, not the Oakland airport that's just a little bit further below their area. And the only other thing I will say, and this is one of the things that's already happening in our Florin community, is, and again, we're open. If you guys want to draw the boundaries and suggest the airport should be part of it, great. We have no qualms about that. But the Florin community brought up some concerns about the airport. And so one of the pollutants we're measuring for, though, in their area is lead emissions from the small aircraft. Even though the airport is not within their boundaries, they identified that they wondered, you know, the airport was on their minds as well. And so we are doing monitoring for lead in their community, even though the airport itself isn't within the boundary. That said, airports in general are regulated at the federal level. So that's definitely not a local control. It's not even necessarily a state CARB issue. So if the airport were identified, it would be as a problem, not just because of everyone saying, hey, I want to know what's going on there, but if we identify through monitoring that there is something going on, that is an example of one of the strategies that would require a lot of partnerships and cooperation from groups, because they would not be bound by decisions that would come out from a local air district.
This is Jeff. I'm okay with all that, and actually I'm more interested in the neighborhoods around the airport than the airport itself.
Gotcha.
The people who live around it who are exposed and really can't are kind of prisoners of it. And although of course people who work there have that, but that's with any airport. So I was thinking about drawing the boundaries, not necessarily with the airport included, but just the neighborhood that would be affected by it. But that's too much information.
No, and that's great. And again, we're just looking for your guys' feedback on what you think makes the most sense.
And one thing I think we should note is that these are initial proposed boundaries that we're sending into the state. If the state selects an area and a community, we will be putting, you know, just like we did in the South Sacramento Florin community, we put together a steering committee where then there's going to be in-depth conversations about where final community boundaries would be, and then that would then be submitted to the state. So, so just, you know, these are not, right now, they're not all set in stone. But it does give us an indication and CARB an indication of the initial areas to look at.
Great point there. Thank you, Janice, for that. And that is a good reminder on that piece. So this is how you get to these particular pages. For those that were asking for more on the technical data, what caused an area to flag, that's then just below the instructions in the maps. You'll see where it says background information. You can look at the very detailed submittal that we provided to CARB in our year 1 submittal. That is the community's technical assessment. And then if you want to see the update that we provided as part of our just weighting of the community elements, the demographics more heavily, that is there in that 2020, what we call the suitability analysis. So for anyone that would like to dive a little bit more into the historic technical information and the current one, those are both there as well. And for anyone that's looking to do a community self-nomination, you are welcome to use any of the information that we're having here in this presentation or on our website to help support it. As I said before, CARB, it's my understanding that the CARB, California Resource Board self-nomination process is informal. They're not expecting a full detailed packet from community groups like they are expecting from the air districts. But to the extent that you wish to utilize any of the technical assessment that we have done as part of our recommendations, you of course are welcome to utilize that information. David, if you could go back one screen. There was a question early on that I responded to in the, I'm sorry, go back to the community air protection page. I guess it was the same screen, my apologies. Someone else earlier had asked though, what happens when you do get data from monitoring in these different communities? So David, if you could just stay back on the, so everyone knows how to get to the community air protection page. This was just that very first box. Then there's a new set of buttons at the bottom. One is labeled community air monitoring. If you click that one and then scroll down on this page, you will get to, and unfortunately, if you hover over this map at all, it automatically starts zooming in and out. This area is the Florin community. So this is simply an example. You saw this as a picture in the slides. But these are all the low-cost sensors that are already now deployed in their community. And if you click any one of these sites, you will find, it will tell you both the location, the current concentration readings, and then you can also map it, show on a plot. And you can look back for the day, the week, or day, week, month, year. So this is just an example, looking back, say for the last month, you can see a lot of these wildfire impacts for particulate matter that finds the smoke, the fine dust particles in the air associated with it. And you can see how that information goes back. There is the ability to look at this even in just data as opposed to a line. And although I believe this information only goes back as far back as, well, it'll only go back as far as we've had the monitors in place, but even then it will only go back 1 year. If at some point a member of the public wants older data or something else that for whatever reason is not displaying on the webpage already, all they need to do is ask us, and any of the data that we are collecting is considered public information. So this is the example we showed about what's going on in Florin right now. And the question that was asked is this data available to the public? And so we're just trying to show that, yes, absolutely. Our intention is that any data we collect, whether it be part of this phase 1 or the more detailed analysis that will come up with what we call phase 2, that the current community picked on how to do this, that data will be available to the public and is available now.
So how reliable are these monitors? I remember when we had the meeting, we had talked about rain, wind, things of that nature that might affect the readings.
So I want to make sure I heard you correctly here. Unfortunately, I've got a fan going behind me, so sometimes it's a little bit tough. If I understood you correctly, it was like, how would you go in here? And did I also hear you asking about how do other things impact this, like rain, wind?
Yes,
Did I hear that correctly?
I remember we asked some of those questions about what was the durability of these monitors and how would rain, wind, and things of that nature would affect the actual reading.
Gotcha. So certainly there are, this is one of those things we could probably spend the next hour on discussing. So I'll try and go just very high level to begin with. There can be impacts, especially for the lower cost sensors. But one thing that we've seen is, and the way I look at it is this, I think they're they're a tool. I would not necessarily go to any one of these sensors and say, is it exactly 185 and I could, bet my life on it? No. But when I see like this line here and I see where it's dropping down, that means I do think it is a very good indicator that the air pollution is getting better. As it starts to spike back up, they do tend to trend very nicely in terms of showing things are getting better, things are getting worse, what's going on. They do pretty good with wind. The flooring community had asked us, and an example we showed them 2 meetings ago for them was they had not the wildfires, but they actually just had some regular community fires. Not that it's regular, but when you have just a structure on fire. And you could actually see when the winds had shifted, because the fire had been going for I think it was like 36 hours where something was burning. And for the first half of the day, you weren't seeing smoke impacts because the wind was not blowing toward them. But you could see when the wind had shifted and started bringing the smoke from those fires into their area. We're going to get a better idea on some of the issues with rain as we head into hopefully the rainy season and not too far away. Generally speaking, though, we expect they'll probably do a pretty good job, even with the rains. Again, if it also says it's 5, am I going to believe it's actually 5? No. But is it, in the single digits versus, 20s or 30s? Yes, I think it's going to be giving us a very good indicator regardless of rain. The biggest issue with wind is not necessarily the instruments not reading properly, but they will only read stuff that is being blown toward them. Much like yourself, if I'm the one blowing out candles on a birthday cake, I don't smell the smoke, even though I'm the one right there where the candles have gone out. But anyone on the other side of those candles is going to be smelling when I blow them out. So to the essence that you are upwind or downwind will definitely have an impact on what the monitors are just able to read.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. So with that said, I do want to just take a moment, thank all of you for the time you've taken out even this evening to listen to us. In advance, big thank you for any of the suggestions on boundaries for these 3 new areas that we are proposing are in need. Again, as I said at the very beginning, we think there are many areas in Sacramento that are in need. Adrian, to your point that someone actually proposed all of Sacramento, that's great. And really what it comes down to is just hopefully we can have additional areas selected, not just this year, but into the future, so we can bring more detailed air monitoring into all the many different areas of our community that are in need of what can be a great program as we move forward. And again, we are going to be proposing these 3 areas with everyone both on this call and outside of it, their feedback on some suggestions for the boundaries. Definitely, there is no conflict with anyone doing self-nominations as well. And I do encourage everyone to keep an eye for when the community air grants become available. One nice thing about the community air grants is if we are selected for additional communities, the good and bad about that is we do also have to operate within a little bit of a box within the guidelines that the state puts forward. We do have certain timelines. Some things can be very pressed. One nice thing about the community air grants is if you have something in mind, very specific, you can always just propose that as part of a community air grant and have even greater community control over that as part of a community air grant. So all three of these processes, district nominations, self-nominations, and community air grants, they're all complementary to one another, and going for one or all three of them does not create any problems at all. With that, I'm going to take one last look at the chat to see if there's anything else. I don't see any other questions there. I don't see any other hand raised. So if there is nothing else, I again just want to thank everyone's time for joining us this evening.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Marina, do you want to go ahead and stop the recording?
Yes, I am stopping it now.
Thank you.